Our team is hosting the Spotlight series to raise awareness and build knowledge about the lived experiences of people with physical, emotional, or culturally diverse characteristics. And for today's event, we partnered with Smile Canada Support Services and the Community Partnership and Engagement Unit of the Toronto Police Service. We're happy to welcome them as well as you all here today. The structure of the event will include a panel-style discussion about the challenges that our clients and families face in keeping themselves safe and strategies to enhance their ability to safely navigate their communities. There'll be 20 to 30 minutes at the end for an audience question and answer period. The panel discussion will be recorded, but not the Q&A period at the end. We hope that you find the session to be engaging, and we encourage your active participation. So feel free to put questions or comments in the chat as we go along. So now I'd like to take a moment to introduce our panelists. Maria Bangash is the Education and Outreach Coordinator at Smile Canada Support Services. She's a first-year student at York University and co-chair for the Holland Bloorview Youth Advisory Council. Maria is also a social media influencer who dedicates her time and energy to disability advocacy. Her work includes spreading advocacy and hosting presentations, workshops, and community conversations with community leaders, universities, hospitals, and various institutions on the importance of culturally responsive, accessible support for racialized children and youth with disabilities. Rayanne Othman is the Director of Service Navigation at Smile Canada Support Services. Her academic background includes work in psychology with postgraduate studies in infant and early childhood mental health. Rayanne dedicates her personal and professional time to advocating for culturally responsive mental health promotion and preventative measures for racialized members in the community. And Mark McCabe has been a police officer with Toronto Police since 2005. After completing training at the Ontario Police College, Mark was transferred to 41 Division in Scarborough. At 41 Division, he worked in the primary response and traffic response units. He then spent 6 years in the Community Relations and Crime Prevention Unit. During that time, Mark started a number of crime prevention initiatives. In March 2020, he was assigned as the Vulnerable Persons Coordinator at the Community Partnership and Engagement Unit of Toronto Police. Mark has received numerous letters of recognition for his work in the community. So the CPI department extends a very warm welcome to our partners in putting this event together for you today. Without further ado, we'll now move into the first question for our panelists. So directing this at Smile Canada Support Services, what challenges do you or your clients face in keeping yourself or themselves safe in the community? Maria, would you like to begin?
Sure. So, like mentioned, I'm a university student. I'm always out and about. I try to keep myself active and social. I love hanging out with my friends. But I live really far from where all the fun things are. I live in York Region, and everything fun is downtown Toronto. So it is a trek and a hike and a pilgrimage for me to just get down there. And obviously, I want to go. I want to see my friends, and I really want to have fun. But at the expense of having fun comes my safety. And I have to factor in a lot of things. So let's take, for example, this Friday is my best friend's birthday. My friends and I are all going to go to the mall, to Yorkdale, and we're going to hang out and have lunch and just chill for a bit. But the process of planning my commute is a headache and a half. I have to factor in, okay, I'm going to Yorkdale. It is in Toronto. I have to take the subway. What line am I going to take? Is it accessible? Am I going to go alone? Am I going to go with my friends? And the questions just don't stop. Am I going to take wheel transit? Does my chair have enough battery? Will I have cell service if something goes wrong? I factor in all these decisions because they affect whether I can go, and they also affect my safety. Because I'm by myself, sometimes when I commute, I have to be extremely cognizant of my surroundings. Who's around me? Do I have all my belongings close enough to me? Am I able to physically protect myself? More often than not, I keep my location on with all my friends so they know where I am. I keep the phone on with somebody too as well. This is something I've done notoriously for years because it gives me comfort when I'm all by myself. So if I plan out my commute, I'm looking at, are things accessible? Do I have that safety net if I really need it? And recently, I've stopped going out by myself. I always have a friend or two or three friends with me because it's the only way I feel comfortable. Because the reality is for me that I can't physically protect myself while I'm in my wheelchair. I use a power chair to get around in my day to day, although you don't see it with me today. And when I get around in my power chair, I physically lose a lot of independence and I cannot protect myself. And that's kind of where my friends come in. They stand close to me, they stand by me, they help me pay my transit fare, and they keep me protected because the reality is I don't know everybody's intentions. I don't know what they mean, I don't know what they say. I don't know what side glances mean or someone approaching me to have a nonchalant conversation. While your intentions might not be ill, the reality is I don't know that. And should they be ill intentions, I can't protect myself. And it's these fears that like limit me from going outside and make me cautious and extremely aware of my surroundings. And then now I've resorted to, if I don't have a friend with me to go out, I'm just not going to go.
Thank you for sharing your personal experience with us, Maria. I just wondered, as you were speaking, was there anything that shifted? Because you mentioned now you won't go out without somebody. Was there a time when you did go out by yourself and perhaps had some kind of experience that deterred you from doing that moving forward?
Yeah, in my first year and a half of post-secondary, I was comfortable going up on myself from York Region into Toronto, but I had a lot of unfortunate experiences relating to ableism and sexism that off-put me very much, and I guess frightened me of going out by myself because I didn't want to be in those situations again. And while I was lucky occasionally to have a bystander, help me or get me out of that situation, that's not always going to be the case. And because they were such repeated occurrences, I just decided that I should go with somebody and that'll be in my best interest.
Thanks. And it sounds like what you're saying, just these considerations that you make with respect to your own personal safety have a significant impact on your life or how you plan to socialize. And I just wondered, how might you mentioned a passerby or bystander that was helpful but might not always be available? Are there ways that the actions of other people who are well intended might jeopardize your safety?
Yeah, I've had that happen a couple of times, especially with paying bus fares or using my Presto card. I've had this happen a lot where sometimes I have a lack of fine motor in both of my hands. So sometimes I'm grabbing my Presto card out of my wallet. It takes me a second or two, like I gotta just yank it out. And when I'm trying to yank it out, I've had people grab my wallet and take it out for me, and I'm just like, why are you grabbing my wallet that has my credit card, my ID, everything valuable to me, and I don't know who you are? If my friends take my wallet from me, it's different because I know them and this is routine for us. They know like when I'm having trouble, I just hand them my wallet. I'm like, okay, I'm tired. My hands are, you can do it. But if you're a complete stranger and you take my wallet from me, that's a huge safety issue. Am I gonna rob me? What do I know? I get it, you might try to be helping me, but could you at least ask and be like, do you need a hand with that or do you got it? It's ask before you assume, I think is very important when you're a bystander.
I think that's a wonderful point, and for us people who might be well intended, well in terms of our intentions, I think that's an important consideration, right? Well, thank you. I think now, Alicia, we'll head into the video from Smile, and then I'll go to Rayanne with about the challenges.
Just give me 1 second. Hold on.
Education Outreach Coordinator at Smile Canada Support Services, and I'm here to talk to you today about Smile.
So, please tell us a little bit about what SMILE does.
We support racialized children and youth with disabilities and their families. Our focus area being diverse Muslim communities, including refugee and new immigrant families. Around the clock, our service navigation team is communicating with our families. They assess our families' needs and provide the right support. Sometimes that means connecting our families with the right personal support worker, getting our families adaptive and assistive technology. And other times, support can be advocating and fighting for our families, or buying emergency groceries. While our program and education outreach team, which is me, puts together inclusive and accessible events, educational workshops, kids and youth programming, and the list could go on. What I do is I use my lived experience as a person with a disability to educate our community on intersectionality and disability and how that shapes up my life.
Okay, something we've all been wanting to know is who is SMILE?
Smile is more than just a charity, idea, or an intention. It's an objective, a mission, and a vision. Our team is made of those with lived experiences, and it's because of this our impact, reach, and support is so meaningful. It can cross cultural barriers.
Okay, so I have another question. Why SMILE?
Why smile? Because smile gives space. There aren't many institutions that are giving space to racialized children and youth with disabilities and their families. Smile gives that space to our families and provides culturally responsive resources and support. In just this past year, we've nearly doubled in our intake of families. And just by this, you can see the need for organizations like Smile are only growing.
So, where can I find SMILE?
So, Smile operates remotely. Our team, supporters, and families are mostly based in Ontario, but our reach goes all across Canada.
So, my last question, what does SMILE mean to you?
Smile to me is a place that helps enable you to be your best self. Our mission, goals, and vision align so perfectly well with my own beliefs. In such a loud and beautiful way, Smile ensures that our children and youth with disabilities who are so often excluded, even excluded in the very dialogue of inclusion, are taking that center stage, smiling and shining in ways that these children and youth should. When Smile notices a gap in our system and institutions, they respond. I noticed that with COVID 19, Smile saw the disproportionate effect it had on our families and almost immediately mobilized an emergency relief fund to bridge that gap. Smile makes sure that every child, regardless of race, religion, disability, or gender, receives culturally appropriate and responsive resources and care so that these kids and youth are equipped and free to be themselves.
So thank you for sharing that powerful video and letting us have a little bit of insight into the great work that Smile is doing to support many many groups in our across, I guess, nationally, right? So thank you for that. And just posing the first question to Rayanne about what challenges do you or your clients face in keeping themselves safe in the community?
First of all, hello everyone. So when it comes to Smile Canada and the work that we do with our families, a huge part of our job is making sure that the supports we're able to get for our families is culturally responsive and culturally supportive. Like that's our main priority for our families. A lot of our families are immigrant and refugee families, so they don't speak English, or they're still getting accustomed to the culture here, and still learning the language as well. And so when you have a child with a disability, there's a lot more resources that you're trying to find for your family and for your child, for your children. So we kind of step in and we're able to offer them that support and guide them on the right resources that they can access that are culturally responsive. And if they aren't, then we make sure that we're supporting them to make sure that these resources are culturally responsive. So just from my 2 years of experience as a service navigator at Smile, and the families that we have spoken to, I primarily work with the Arabic speaking families. So I deal with a lot of Syrian refugee families, Sudanese refugee families, just all across the board. And something that one of our families has experienced is harassment within their home. They live in an apartment building. They have 3 children with a disability. They don't speak English. Their children also are still kind of learning English as well. But with the disability, there can be some behavioral challenges. And so there's some screaming. There's a bit of loud noise, and the neighbors tend to get very disrupted by the noise. And instead of approaching the family and having a discussion, the family tends to face a lot of harassment from the neighbors and getting like notes on their doors with very discriminatory, very rude things written on it. And because the family doesn't really understand English and they don't have anyone that's supporting them in the way that Smile is when it comes to a culturally responsive way, they'll send us pictures of these notes, or they'll ask us, or if they come across a neighbor in the elevator or in the parking garage, like who's yelling at them, they'll start recording, and they'll send us these recordings, and they'll ask us like, what did they say? What does this letter say? Like, should I be concerned for my safety? And just having to relate to the family, well, okay, like this is what the letter says, maybe we should start talking to building management about the harassment, maybe we should make some reports. The family gets very scared because then I have to talk to somebody of authority. I don't know how to communicate this stuff with them. So a lot of our families face those safety concerns with that language barrier, with that cultural barrier as well. We aren't trained on how to approach these situations when it comes to harassment. When it comes to service navigation and finding these disability supports, it comes very naturally to us. But when it comes to a family experiencing harassment and us having to find, resources like reaching out to Toronto Police Services or any other police service region, depending on where the family is, then that's where we kind of hit a roadblock as well with the families. And we're learning along with them as well, but also kind of teaching them like, it's okay for us to reach out to the police. We'll be there with you every step of the way to make sure that you're safe. But there's always that fear as well. And I really liked what Maria had mentioned earlier when she was talking about, taking out her Presto card and somebody just kind of grabbing it and just doing it for her because, they just want to get on the bus as well. And it was ask before you assume. We had just another story to share. We had a family who, it's a single mom and she has 2 sons with disability. And they have a physical disability. They're able to communicate. They have a level of independence as well. And mom has a respite worker that comes into the home to support them while she goes out and runs her errands. And in this particular day, the respite worker wasn't able to come, canceled on her last minute, but she really needed to go run those errands. And she knew she was going to be gone for maybe an hour maximum, and that her children were able to take care of themselves. They were youth, so they were over the age of 18. So when she did leave the house, her neighbors realized that she was leaving by herself and that she was leaving them alone as well. They haven't interacted with mom before. They don't really know her situation. And so they just assumed like she's just leaving them by themselves. They can't take care of themselves. Like having that assumption that her sons with a disability cannot take care of themselves before even asking and interacting and getting to know, your neighbors. And so when mom came back from grocery shopping, there was police at her door and there was a lot of questioning. And again, mom doesn't speak English very well, so she's having a hard time communicating. But thankfully, just from the way she was trying to communicate, one of the officers realized that she spoke Arabic, and so did he. And they were able to communicate while the officer was able to kind of understand the situation, and he was able to comfort mom as well and just let her know, like, it must have been a misunderstanding. But just from a community perspective and from just from a community perspective, the neighbors trying to understand the situation and getting to know the family before making that assumption that these youth don't know how to take care of themselves and she left them alone. I think it was really, really important that police officer was able to speak Arabic and able to communicate with her, because I feel like otherwise the mom wouldn't have known how to proceed or what to do, and maybe the situation might have escalated.
Wow. Thank you for sharing those 2 very powerful examples from the families, the clients, and caregivers that you work with at Smile. And I think the take-home message that I hear just from what Maria and Rayanne have said so far was to ask before you assume. And I think that we all have implicit biases. We all make assumptions about other people. But I think treating each individual with respect is paramount, and trying to also have compassion, right? I think we need a bit more of that in this world. But those powerful examples, I think that your last example in particular with the police at the door, or the officer being able to communicate in Arabic, I think that that's a good segue and time to bring Mark into the conversation here. So Mark, my question to you, again related to the challenges. What challenges do you or your colleagues at the Toronto Police Service face in keeping the community safe, especially when interacting with vulnerable persons, or people that don't speak English as their first language, or there are cultural barriers to communication?
Right. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark McCabe, as Patrice introduced me there. Uh, so just to pick up on Rianne's point there, what she made about English maybe being a second language, or not speaking any English. Toronto Police, and generally most police services, but particularly Toronto, because we're so diverse, we do our best to try and accommodate everyone out there. If you've seen a lot of our police officers out and about in the field, there's generally a multitude of backgrounds and cultures and everything else. I'm Irish. I don't have any really language skills that would be beneficial, but there's a lot of other officers out there. And just to point out on this point too, if 180 languages is what's available, so if you're ever in a situation that you need to call 911, the call taker has access to 180 interpreters instantly. So don't ever hesitate calling police. Now, some incidents where if it's an ongoing and it's not life-threatening, you wouldn't necessarily need to call 911. You would call the non-emergency phone number, which I'll provide a bit later on as well. So I just wanted to point that out there. For us, we over the past few years, we've been doing our best to try and understand the various communities out there, particularly when it comes to vulnerable persons. I'm the vulnerable person coordinator. So our unit, we don't do any investigations. However, I would liaise a lot with experts from various backgrounds and also with the community. So it's kind of like a back and forth information sharing. And one of our the best tools we have is our committee, which is a Beyond Disabilities uh, Community Consultative Committee. So if you want, I can bring up a slide with some PowerPoint here, but I'll just see if
Sure,
that'll
go
work
ahead.
for me. How's that working? Okay, great. So I'll run through a bit about what we do. I know a lot of times people think of police as just driving around in cars, sometimes with the lights and sirens going, and we're just rushing around and going to calls, which is the case a lot of times. However, those officers you generally see on the road are what we call the primary response unit officers. So they would be responding to radio calls. So if you call from your apartment or from your house to say, uh, I'm scared, or my apartment's being broken into, and so on. They're the officers that will respond. In the background of that, we have our community partnership and engagement unit, which I'm part of. And in here, we're made up of a multitude of programs. So in here, we coordinate the auxiliaries, the volunteers. We have various liaison officers. Throughout the years, we run these various events, whether it's Asian Heritage Month, or I know my partner who's hoping to pop in today is working on now Islamic Heritage Month that he's planning as well. So there's a multitude of events that we do. So we don't respond to the 911 calls. Obviously, in the circumstances where it's a crisis and they need us, we'll certainly respond because we are obviously fully trained and fully armed police officers, but we're not going out and about into the 911 calls. In addition to that, what we coordinate this unit is neighborhood officers. Neighborhood officers are dedicated officers that work right within your neighborhood. So these officers as well are not responding to the 911 calls, but these are in and out of your neighborhood on a regular basis. If you ever have something going on in the community and you want to chat with the officers, you want them to attend an event or there are issues, you can simply look up Toronto Police website for your neighborhood and it'll list the officers. The great thing about these officers is there's probably about 8 of them in total because of the alternating shifts, but it's the same faces, the same names, day in, day out. So they get to know the neighborhood extremely well. So it's not like you call them up one day and then someone else totally different appears. These officers are working in the neighborhood and they want to kind of get to know you, and they you want to get to they want you to get to know them as well. So that's a neighborhood officer. So if you're ever wondering, you can look up Toronto Police website and see what they do and how to get them involved. So these are all ways that we're trying to get a better understanding of what you need out there, particularly with the vulnerable persons or anyone that is vulnerable. Another program that we have that's coordinated of our unit is the Mobile Crisis Intervention Team. Mobile Crisis Intervention Team is made up of a specially trained mental health liaison officer and also a crisis nurse that is trained in mental health. So in the event where we have someone that's in a crisis, sending officers, we all have some training, but these officers are very specialized, and they also have the advantage of having a mental health nurse travel with them. So they can address the situation quicker as opposed to two police officers going out. You have someone that is trained specifically in mental health. So this program was coordinated out of here as well. How you would ever access that is just by calling 911 and telling them your situation, and the call taker would basically take the information and then send out the mobile crisis intervention team. And they are extremely well trained when it comes to dealing with various type of crises. Something else that's run out of our unit is Focus Toronto. Focus Toronto basically stands for Furthering Our Community by Uniting Services. This is an initiative that's been growing over the past few years. It's run by the City of Toronto, Toronto Police, United Way, and they're made up of 100 agencies. Actually, at this stage, I think now it's well over 100. And how this works, if there's a situation, as you can imagine, we get called for a variety of different calls. Not all of them are necessarily police calls, but sometimes people don't know who else to call. If the officers go to a situation and they come across someone that needs help but doesn't need police help, and they may not know what the best source of help is, they can simply take the information. Throughout the service, there is all these divisions have these tables, and what they would do is get together with generic information. So for example, if it's someone that's, say, a teenager that's perhaps we would an example would be someone that's a teenager that's getting mixed up with gangs or in trouble, or if we have someone that's maybe living alone that is vulnerable, that needs various services, Meals on Wheels, various assistance. They present the case without any identifying factor. So they don't give the person's name, they don't give the address, they don't give the age, you just give generic information. And then what happens is the agencies will step forward and say, hey, we can take care of that, and they will deal with it. The thing is, it's followed up with from United Way, followed up by the city, and followed up with Toronto Police. So it's these agencies, it's followed up regularly to make sure the person got the help they need. So the police probably in 8 out of 10 cases step away from the situation because it's not a police matter, and one of these agencies take over. So this is a fantastic program as well that is out there, and Toronto Police are strongly involved in.
I think that highlights of the importance of closing the loop. So thank you for sharing that example, because I think sometimes people are left hanging and don't feel like if somebody doesn't know, they don't necessarily direct them somewhere else or make sure that they, got that support that they needed. Mark,
Exactly.
I was going to say, Mark, there is one question for you in the chat that I see. Does the mobile crisis team assist with elopers, i.e. adults with mental handicap that want to explore on their own?
Not necessarily. I would say for something like that, the mobile crisis, they're literally a first responder. So they are going to someone that's in crisis there and then to deal with the situation. Something like that would be probably better dealt with through our focus tables, where they could make it appropriate, like the appropriate service or the appropriate officers to follow up with the person. That would probably be better fit for that than a mobile crisis team.
Thank you.
Hopefully that answered that.
I did have a question just to kind of go off of that as well. So for an eloper, whether they're a child or youth, would somebody like that be eligible or be like a perfect candidate for the vulnerable person's registration or registry?
Oh, definitely, yeah. And I can speak to that now. I think was it coming up a little later? I could speak to it now if whatever works best for the schedule.
You can continue, and we'll get there. It's
Okay,
really up
sure,
to you,
sure.
Mark. Whatever works for you.
Okay, no problem. So this is just to give an idea of the focus table. So it's covered throughout Toronto, and actually they're outside Toronto as well. So anyone that is living outside of Toronto, they're I wouldn't say Ontario wide, but they are growing and growing with most police services. Another thing that we have within each of the divisions is the Community Police Liaison Committee. So these are made up of a senior officer in the division, a police officer, and community members. So they would work with about what's going on in the community as a whole, a general community. From there, we have, and this is kind of more, I guess, where I would come in, or my colleagues in this office, is we have our community consultative committee. Years ago, this was called the Chief's Consultative Committee because the idea was the community would tell the chief what was going on, but it's a partnership, so they switched it to community, which is much better. And these are the different groups that we represent. So we have the Aboriginal, Asia Pacific, Black, Chinese, Muslim, person with disabilities, and seniors. I'm the liaison for the person with disabilities, and I'm the liaison for the seniors committees. These are made up of individuals. So we have two senior officers involved, yeah, myself, and then we have co-chair who is an expert in whatever the background is. So for example, on our seniors committee, I have one of the top geriatric doctors from University Health Network who's involved, Kim Whaley, who is the founder of Well Partners, who's one of the top elder abuse lawyers. So we're extremely fortunate. The person with disabilities, our committee there is made up of those organizations there. So we have Brain Injury Society of Toronto, CAMH, Autism Speaks, Bob Rumball, March of Dimes, Progress Place, and so on. So a multitude of organizations are represented here. So this is where the community have issues, sometimes that approach these organizations, and those organizations would bring that in, a topic up at the meetings or the ongoing communication that we have. Some of the work that they've done is they have put out the Invisible Me video, understanding people living with invisible disabilities, which was an excellent tool. This was originally done for police officers as a training tool. However, that became quite popular, and people asked could they see it and could they share it. So it's now just on our YouTube channel. If you Google Toronto Police Invisible Me, it pops up there. And they have also worked with our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion unit, who are doing an accessibility audit. So I don't know if you've ever been in some Toronto police stations, but some of them were extremely old and weren't that accessible. I know I came from Scarborough 41 Division, and it was nothing but steps and stairs, and it was just a terrible building. So they're building a new building, but it's not just the police making up these suggestions. We actually rely heavily on groups such as this committee, who are the experts out there as well. And just another thing I thought of on Focus, Surrey Place are actually a part of the Focus team as well, the Focus table. So they're one of the organizations that are in there. The other thing, or Rianne just mentioned too, was the Vulnerable Person Registry. So I'll talk about that shortly. I'm just going to see if
Mark, do you want us? You're
sorry,
checking in with your colleague, I guess.
I am actually right now. Yeah, I just
Okay.
sent them a text. We got tied up, so I'm just seeing if he's available now to pop
Do
in.
you want us to, so just to share with the audience, we do have a 2-minute video clip from the Invisible Me video that Mark mentioned. Mark, would now be a good time to play it?
Sure, that'd be perfect. Yeah, that'd be great. And I'll see
Okay.
how my colleague's schedule is there.
Okay, so we'll do that. And we're moving into the second part of our discussion, which is about strategies to help improve safety and help our clients and their families feel safe in the communities, their local communities. Mark already alluded to a lot of the strategies, it sounds like, used by the Toronto Police Service. I know I didn't know about community liaison officers or community consultative committees, etc. And this was breaking news for me, even that there's 180 languages that are available for interpretation services. So I think that us, as whether we're clients ourselves or we're all members of various communities, so I think it's important for us to be aware of these, that these services are available, whether personally or professionally, so we can help to better serve the clients, families, and caregivers that we interact with. So we're just, as I said, we're moving into strategies. And I think that, as I said, Mark highlighted a lot of strategies related to some of the challenges that both Rayanne and Maria mentioned, whether it's dealing with culture and language barriers or the built environment and some of the challenges navigating it. So I think now we're just going to show you a 2-minute video clip of an interaction with a gentleman with, I think he had Asperger's syndrome, and he's interacting with a police officer. Go ahead, Alicia.
If the officer wanted to get as much information out of me as possible, I suppose it would be important for me to let him know that I have Asperger's, and it might be difficult for me to get words out at that moment, but I wouldn't be perfectly coherent. I would probably be straining myself for words, and I may or may not be forming perfect sentences. I have to really think to get my answer out. The answer wouldn't come as naturally. A lot of the time I am worrying if I am saying exactly the right thing. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and not being able to do that at exactly the right moment can cause me a little bit of stress. So if it's especially for someone of a relative amount of importance, like a police officer, it would probably cause me a fair deal of stress. And hopefully they would be able to understand in that context that I'm going through a little bit of an issue at the time. Just be patient with us, I implore you, and as long as you don't yell at us, we won't shut down. I would just say if the police officer just allowed me to take my time, just keep breathing, just allow me to collect my thoughts, and let my thought process come to a good point where I can explain the situation, and we can get to the point where it's beneficial to the both of us. This is the mind of an Asperger's person going.
Perfect, thank you. So that little video clip just provides some insights into the experiences that some clients might have in dealing with the police service. Back to you, Mark.
Hi, thanks, Patrice. So I was able to find our Muslim liaison officer in between meetings. So this is Officer Haroon Siddiqui. So he can tell you a bit about what he does.
Yeah, so hello everyone. So my name is Haroon Siddiqui. I work out of the Community Partnership Engagement Unit. I work along with Mark here. A lot of the stuff that we do is basically anything to do with the Islamic community. We also have a Southwest liaison officer as well, that we pretty much work along with, because a lot of Muslims are also South Asian, and there's a lot of Arab countries as well that have Muslims. So a lot of the stuff that we do in I guess overlap.
Yeah.
So basically what we do is we're the middleman between the Islamic community and the Toronto Police Service. So that deals with, it can deal with seniors, people with disabilities. It can deal with just the mosque itself, security, really anything, anything the community needs. We're really there for their support, and that's pretty much what we do.
Thank you, Officer Siddiqui. Are there any particular examples of situations that you're able to share with us that,
Yeah, so
with
I've
respect to
dealt with
community safety?
yeah, so just recently I actually brought Mark. We attended this mosque at IFT. It's in Nugget in Scarborough. They have one of the largest senior programs. We went and we spoke to the seniors. Approximately, I think there were almost 50 to 100 seniors at that time, about frauds and scams. So that's something that's very important with our seniors, especially. with all these phone calls that they're getting and fake CRA calls, just to inform them and educate them. I've also dealt with the same with another organization called Rama organization as well. Same thing. Other than that, I do a lot of safety protocols for mosques, um, even educational programs with mosques as well, any kind of schools, organizations. There's really no boundaries. It could be, I can go from like to a festival to start educating or teaching a certain topic on in policing. So it can, there's really no boundaries for it. If I can do it, or if I can't, I'll find someone that can.
Great. And this is a question both for you and Mark. Knowing that many racialized people or newcomers or those with language barriers might have had negative experiences with authority figures in their home countries or even in Canada in their time here, how do they receive you and how do you foster trust?
Yeah, so that's one of the main things that we're trying to do is bridge that gap. A lot of people with their lived experiences from back home, it could be back home or it could be just an experience that they had with police. We're trying to change that by educating them, visiting them. Just recently, we did a big backpack organization with another organization. We collected over, I think over, I forgot how many backpacks there were, over 100 backpacks, and we donated them to the hotels where the Afghan refugees were coming. So these Afghan refugees are seeing us bringing these backpacks to them. And so to the two organizations that we're dealing with was Costi and Polycultural that are dealing with the actual hotels where Afghan refugees are coming in. And they said, hey, listen, this is great stuff, but what we want to do is there's a few things that we want to teach them on road safety. Because I guess they're having with newcomers, the kids are just running around. They're not understanding about the streets and the streets because different, I guess, different countries, the street cars come different ways. They go, can you educate them on that type of stuff? And we would say, okay, fine, but we don't really speak Farsi. But we'll say, no problem, you come, we'll bring a translator, and we can work with that community and just educate them on like a topic such as that.
Great, thank you. So
Okay,
Mark,
and again,
I don't know if you want to continue with any of your slides or if you have any thoughts to add to what Officer
yeah, no,
Siddiqui
thank.
said.
Okay,
Yeah, I can continue with the registry then. I'll let Haroon get going to his next meeting there.
thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
No worries.
So that's good. I'm glad you had a chance to join us. So sometimes I might run into an incident with any of some of the backgrounds or cultural diverse communities we deal with, and I mightn't be too familiar. And then we would reach out to someone like Haroon or the many other officers that we have from those various backgrounds. So, but yeah, I can continue on with the registry if you like. Give you.
Okay, I'd say we have about 5 more minutes, and then I'd like to to ask some questions to Smile just about strategies.
Sure. I'll do this quick. Has it popped up yet?
No.
Sorry, yes, or no?
No.
No, okay. There you go. Should be okay now.
Yes.
So one thing I just wanted to point out, we do have a Toronto Police Beyond Disabilities Consultative Committee meeting. That's a mouthful. So basically it's the Persons with Disabilities Committee. We're having a virtual town hall meeting next Wednesday. I thought it was a long way away, but it's coming around quite quick. If anyone is interested in joining, the information is there. You can just send an email to, it should be at the bottom there. It's info@bist.ca, and that's basically the Brain Injury Society of Toronto. Our co-chair is from that organization, so she's kind of coordinating it. And part of that meeting, we'll talk about the Vulnerable Person Registry, which I'm going to talk about now, but give you a bit of an update, as well as what training police officers received. And then, of course, it's town hall, so it'll be open for questions if anyone has. So you're welcome. Anyone that's listening is welcome to join that next week. So one of the things we have as an important tool is what we call the Vulnerable Person Registry. What this basically is, this is an online database that allows you to enter yourself. In some cases, we have people that are maybe diagnosed with autism, high function and they'll actually register themselves, or you can enter a loved one on here. And the idea here, in the event that you have someone, loved one or whoever it is, that might get lost or leave the home and not come back, or we deal a lot of it with people with Alzheimer's, for example, or dementia, that will leave the house, forget where they're going, and so on. So what it allows you to do is be proactive. So it lets you put the information on here, name, address, and so on. It also gives you the opportunity, I don't know if you can see this form, but methods of approach that would make them feel most comfortable. So you know better than me, sometimes people that we're dealing with, they may not want to be approached closely, or they may be very happy being close to someone, or whatever the case is. So you can put all this information down here, as well as any medical conditions they can put in. You can update it on a regular basis as need be. You would just go in and put in a supplemental report. A photo can be added. So what happens with this is, if, say, for example, someone goes missing, it allows the police officer to have access to this information in his car, as opposed to going to the address, getting all this, asking for a description, asking for the person's name, asking if you have a photo. This can be proactively put into the computer. So as the officers are driving to the residence or driving to look for the individual, they will have a lot of this information up front. Often what's useful is there's a particular maybe location that the person goes back to. People with dementia sometimes go to an old workplace, or they'll go back to an old address that they used to live in, or various other locations. You can put that information in there. So it helps eliminate the time that the person has actually gone missing. It's also used for people that maybe are in crisis and so on. This can be put in. So we often have, say, people would put in, say, my son is scared of police. So if that information is entered, the police officers know maybe to back off, or maybe park the car around the corner, as opposed to someone that says, hey, my son or daughter is fascinated by police cars, or they love seeing police. Well, then, well, let's be more visible, and maybe they'll even flag the police officers down, that kind of thing. So this is the vulnerable person registry. It's in the process of hopefully being updated. It's not the most user friendly when you go to use it at the moment, but still the information is excellent. That if you can put it in there, it's excellent tool. Just it might be a little bit finicky to put the information in there because of a computer system that's being used, but it's fully active. These are examples. Might react to loud noises and flashing lights. Might not make eye contact, as we know, depending on the type of disability that the individual has. Maybe they don't make eye contact. And although officers are being trained on this constantly, it's just a useful reminder to say, oh, okay, the person's not being evasive, or the person's not being rude. That's just the way they are. Could be insensitive to pain, or hypersensitive to touch, and might like to grab or touch. Again, excellent information. Officers responding to a call. As you can imagine, in the news the past month, it seems, and especially last night, officer safety is a big thing. But if the officers know ahead of time, hey, this person might like to grab and touch. I used to deal with a gentleman years ago who was fascinated by our crest on our shirt, and would just love touching it and love feeling the sensory, I guess for him it was sensory. He loved feeling that, and I was aware of that, and I had no issues with it. But I could see someone else maybe that doesn't know what's going on and is put into a situation like that and being approached so closely, it might be a concern. But this is a tool that we use, and also gathering the information and the training from our consultative committee. This is how police officers kind of learn, and this is how our training is kind of put together. So it's not police making it up, we're relying on the experts out there in the field.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Mark. It's been very helpful. And I think that, as you said, the registry is a good starting point. And even though some tweaks are needed, it's important, again, for us to be aware of this. So just to summarize, some of the strategies that you mentioned were having the neighborhood officers to build trust in certain communities, or having the community consultative committees, having this vulnerable persons registry, right, as well as the community liaison officers such as Officer Siddiqui. I think that those are definitely important and things that I didn't know about until we had a conversation about it. So I'm glad that you shared those things with us. And just it also, the last bit, what you said in disclosing or sharing with us the vulnerable persons registry, it took me back to what Maria and Rayanne said about asking before you assume. So whether you have that information ahead of time or even in interactions with clients and their families or caregivers in the community, I think that having that appreciative inquiry approach and really asking the questions rather than making assumptions makes for a better outcome for everyone. So now turning it back to Smile, I wanted to make sure that we hear from Maria and Rayanne about strategies that you or your clients can use to keep yourself or themselves safe in the community. And I did see that there are questions in the chat. We'll go to those in the discussion period in about 10 minutes or so.
I can start. So, like I mentioned, I commute pretty much everywhere and I'm always out. So, a couple of things I like to do is have my GPS location on. So, I have my location shared with my friends or with my mom or anyone who's in my close area that I'm in, just so they know where I am. Or I'll text them when I get home. Especially now when I go to university a lot. Sometimes I'm waiting around for my taxi or my wheel transit to come, and I've had days where I sit on the phone with some of my close friends for like an hour or so because I'm just sitting there waiting. And sometimes that helps me because I've been approached before and had people make inappropriate comments or make me very uncomfortable. So having the phone on eliminates that for me. And also sometimes like when I'm just out, I'm checking my surroundings, making sure I know where I am, that I know my exact location that I need to go to, who's around me, being aware of my own self and my own belongings. Because when I go out, I'm responsible for me, my mobility aid being my power chair, and all my belongings, my backpack, my purse, my phone, my wallet. I have to be very aware of my surroundings, and my friends always know what's in my bag, what's in my purse. So if something is like missing or gone, we can identify it really quickly and figure things out. And they also know to stand close to me when we're on the bus or on the subway because my backpack is behind me. I have no access to it. So them standing behind me is like I guess like a border between my backpack and everybody else so that they can be nearby it as well as my purse or my wheelchair stick that I use to drive around because those are all parts of me that I need to keep moving. Um, and even just something I've done recently now, especially with going on the bus or on the subway, is if a driver asks me where my destination is or where I'm going to stop, I understand that it's helpful and it makes it easier for the driver to stop the ride for me, but I usually just prefer not to answer until I know where I'm going because I don't know who's coming off the bus behind me and what their intentions are. So just being always cognizant of my surroundings, my physical, and as well as the people that I'm with. These three are what makes me comfortable when I go out and gives me the confidence and reassurance that I should go out and I do deserve to have outings with my friends, go to campus safely, and feel comfortable in the environment that I'm in.
Thank you for sharing those strategies, Maria. It sounds like you've given a lot of thought to it for your obviously to keep yourself safe, but also provided education to those around you in terms of what they can do to support you and your safety overall in those situations. I just wondered in terms of every day is getting progressively colder and the days are getting shorter. I just wondered if there are any changes or adaptations you make based on the time of year it is in terms of your personal safety.
Yeah, I was joking with my friends that when I see them this Friday, I don't know when the next time is going to be because after this it gets colder, it gets darker, and there's a lot more snow on the ground. During the winter months, more than often, I don't end up going out and I don't have these outings or we don't go shopping or we don't go to the movies or whatever it is because the commute can be very cumbersome for me and also really physically unsafe. The snow isn't always shoveled at the bus stops or at the subways or for the GO train and I don't want to flip my chair over on the train tracks. That's just the truth. I really don't want to topple over sideways. Not something I'm into. And it's harder because things don't get shoveled. There's no salt on the ground, and sometimes my parents aren't free to drive me around everywhere, and I don't prefer that either. I like to have my independence when I go out with my friends because it makes me feel like I'm grown up and I'm at my own age and I don't need someone to like Uber me around everywhere. I like having that independent aspect of myself. But when physical barriers are not taken care of, I then lose my independence and then I end up stuck at home in the winter. I basically hibernate in the winter and come out when the sun's out.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So Rayanne, I turn it over to you. Any strategies that the clients at Smile that you work with have used to keep themselves safe in the community? You're muted.
Sorry about that. I think a big thing for us is education. And, when Mark was speaking earlier, about educating the community, all these different educational workshops that happen with TPS and different community organizations, I think that's definitely a big thing. It's very, very important for our families to know, educating them on who they can reach out to and that they can reach out to someone in their language or somebody who's Muslim, somebody who would understand them, makes things a lot easier for families. I think it brings a sense of security, knowing that you do have that support out there that you just don't know is available. So definitely, teaching families what these resources are. One thing that we've done at Smile is we've taken safety very seriously, especially with some children who tend to elope or, if monthly fire alarm testings that happen in the building. Sometimes we talked about how loud noises can be very disruptive to some children with disabilities. And so we have a youth who goes to the balcony because he just can't handle how loud the fire alarm testing sound is. So mom had spoken to the building managers and asked if they can just inform her ahead of time so that they know that they need to leave maybe an hour in advance before it happens. Because if he locks himself out in the balcony, then that's a safety issue as well, right? So we talk about a lot of safety measures that families can take within their home, like extra locks on the balcony doors, or like putting up a net in the balcony. Removing anything like chairs or anything that children can step on if they are in the balcony, because lack of safety skills is also something that some children with disabilities and youth with disabilities face. We do offer families funding for these types of items because of how important it is. Even when it comes to children who elope, like labels on their clothes with, a phone number or an address. Well, not an address, but a phone number to call if the child does get lost. These are all measures that we do take, but I think education is the most important piece of all of it.
Thank you for that, Rayanne. So before we go to the chat, I just wondered if I wanted to thank all of the panelists for our engaging discussion today. And I just wondered if you have any additional comments that you want to add about anything that we've talked about today. I'm just scrolling back through the chat to see what questions we've missed. I see that Maria and Rayanne answered some as we were going along. And hopefully the one about the vulnerable persons registry got answered. I'll just scroll down to the end, and if there's any that I missed, please let me know. So there was one, how can we assist Toronto Police to identify persons with mental handicaps and limited speech, which will require their support? For example, do we need an ID card or wallet card to show? Not sure if the vulnerable persons registry, if the existence of that answers that question, or if you will have anything you want to add there, Mark. You're muted.
I guess the registry would definitely be a big advantage for us, for police. If you have a card, that's great. I know, I think it was the Brain Injury Society of Ontario, have come up with a card as well. So a card is a great tool, kind of anything that you have. And as I said, these organizations are doing training with officers on an ongoing basis. So they're, compared to like years and years ago where there wasn't that much training, now there is a lot. So they're hopefully educating the officers as we go along. But any tool that you can give us to help us, it's fantastic. We're open to that.
And just a question for me, the education that the officers receive, is it an ongoing thing or a one point in time and you check that box and you've completed it?
No, it's interesting. There's a presentation that's given when the officers first started, recruits have started. That input was given by the committee. And then also every year we have to go back to requalify for our use of force, and it's a 3-day mandated course at the college every year. So everything has to be requalified, and the disabilities presentation was part of that, and the training was part of that again. So it's constantly being refreshed. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I see another question for you, Mark. Is the Vulnerable Services Registry available through all police services, i.e. Peel, York, etc.?
It is. It's not combined. So, for example, York have their own one, and then Peel would have their own one, and the various other services have. I think most services probably have some kind of registry in place. But yeah, the are a lot of services out there that do have it for sure.
Are there plans to connect them? Because I think of just even driving to another region is, something could happen outside of your home region, right?
I know. Ideally, you would like to say yes. When that would happen, who knows? I think maybe when we get ours revamped, maybe then there'd be more potential to link it up with the other, because not everyone is using the same kind of software and all
Right.
that
Fair enough.
IT stuff. Yeah, but
The
it would be ideal,
logistics.
sure. Yeah.
Another question for you, Mark. Does the mobile crisis team or other cross-reference the vulnerable persons registry while assessing a situation?
They would, yeah. So basically, when they're dispatched to a call, if you haven't seen a police car recently, and I'd encourage you, if you're ever near one and you want to take a peek, the officers are more than happy to, during COVID, obviously not so much, but now they're more than happy to kind of give you a look at what it's like inside. Uh, what happens is it would be so to give you, I'll run through it. For example, if someone calls in and a person is in crisis, the dispatcher would say it on the radio and also put it on the officer's computer screen, as well as the GPS to the location. And on there, it will pop up the person is on the vulnerable person registry, so they could access it going to the call, or before they go into the address, they can pull it up and see all the information there. And the mobile crisis, they use a police car too. And for some reason, they're in an unmarked car because a lot of times they don't use the ones with the lights and sirens. Uh, the dispatcher will make them aware that, oh, by the way, this person is on the registry, and read out whatever relevant information. Yeah.
Thank you. And then I see there was a question for Mario, which I believe you answered in the chat about your GPS app or system that you use, and if your loved ones can access your location while traveling. I think you said I use the Find My iPhone app and it allows my location to be shared. Okay. And I had just one more question in the chat. We heard that Medic Alert has partnered with Toronto Police recently. Are officers aware to check bracelets or any wearable ID on vulnerable people?
They are, yes. Definitely Medical Alert, or the officers should be all aware that what that program is and and so on. Often the question that we get is, what's the difference between a vulnerable person registry and Medical Alert? So the main difference is the Medical Alert is going to be more of a reactive situation. So if they come across the person on the street or a person, and then they'll check the bracelet, as opposed to the registry is more proactive, where they have that information prior to going to it. So it's good to have people on both registries, for example, on the Medical Alert and also on the Vulnerable Person Registry, because the Medical Alert bracelet isn't much use if the officers are responding to the call. They don't have any information. It's great when they come across the individual, then they can see the bracelet. So it's good that kind of have both bases covered, the proactive and then also the reactive side.